With God, conscience trumps confidence. This week we're talking about how God seems to choose people who are underqualified for assignments that seem way over ambitious. This big story comes out of the individual accounts of Isaiah's vision and call from God, Peter leaving his fishing business to follow Jesus, and Paul recalling his extraordinary reversal from religious policeman to missionary pioneer. This is Ian Gregg introducing the teaching from the Bible reading set for Sunday, February the 6th. That's for the many and diverse churches and chapels that follow the Revised Common Lectionary scheme, and it links to the Living Word study for February the 6th, so see the link in the notes below. This week's story of how God values conscience over competence ties in with last week's when we heard about the young Jeremiah being called by God and his excuse that he could not go out and speak because he was too young and inexperienced. But the Lord wasn't accepting excuses. He told Jeremiah he was to go where he was shown, say what he was given to say, with the assurance, perhaps not entirely comforting, and I will rescue you. This week, Isaiah tells the story of his call. Whatever confidence he had was blown away in the vision he received, seeing into heaven and perceiving such holiness in God that he thought the experience would kill him. He knew from the scriptures that no one could see God and live, but God used this traumatic experience to begin a process of building into Isaiah such fortitude that he would find himself speaking out clearly in situations where everyone was rubbishing what he said. In his own words, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, and they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, and the whole earth is full of his glory. The doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal from the altar and touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. He said, Go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of the people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. Well, fast forward in time for a moment, and while Paul was under guard in Rome towards the end of his life, he was allowed to invite the local Jewish leaders, and sharing this Isaiah, ever hearing but never understanding, prophecy, he told them his story. It was a difficult one for them, how he, a Jew, had been commissioned by God to proclaim the message that salvation had been sent to Gentiles who didn't know God at all. Many years before that, Jesus had taken Isaiah's words and repeated them in the context of one of his best-known stories. You remember the one about the sower of seed and the 4 kinds of soil? So where is all this going? It's about the challenge of faithfully conveying a message from God when people are often not free and not willing to receive it. That takes a certain kind of courage and persistence. And so that brings us to Simon Peter, the fisherman, and how he revealed a remarkable quality that he had. He was no orator, and as we may recall, he was rather prone to make mistakes, but he learned from them. And in time he became so strong in the Lord that in Acts we see him giving an extemporary prophetic message to the crowd gathered at Pentecost. Later we see him boldly speaking truth to power when summoned by the Jewish Sanhedrin Council, who had condemned his Lord to death, and despite their threats, leading the apostolic teaching which formed and strengthened the early church. But his story starts here on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. As Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him, listening. He saw, at the water's edge, 2 boats left there by the fishermen. He got into the one belonging to Simon and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." They caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break, and they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and his companions were astonished at the catch. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. And now we moved from the picturesque scene in Galilee to a noisy, busy, and prosperous seaport the other side of the Mediterranean. This is about Paul's call to ministry that would take him from people of his own Jewish culture to the Greek towns and cities, and eventually to what became the fastest growing of the churches he planted, which was in Corinth. And in this next excerpt, he reminds them of the central heart of the message that he gave them originally. How Jesus Christ died on the cross as a self-sacrifice for sin, but also what it meant when he rose from that death alive and seen by many for a period of weeks before ascending into heaven. Paul's own experience came later in an extraordinary, dazzlingly bright encounter with Jesus in a vision which left him temporarily blind. Paul, having seen the risen Jesus in his heavenly glory, knew full well this was the heart of the good news. Jesus is alive, and new life in him, starting now and continuing into eternity, is his gift to those who turn to him. It is this that makes the gospel life-giving and life-changing, as Paul emphasizes in his own words. "I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you. By this gospel you are saved if you hold firmly to the word. What I received, I pass on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also. For I do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am. This is what we preach, and this is what you believed." When we look at Paul and Isaiah and other great heroes of faith, we wonder how we could ever match up. But that's the wrong question. That's gazing on the branches and the fruit, rather than thinking about the unexciting roots from which it grew. Who God calls, he grows, and equips. One common thread of these three stories is the same unstated question that God is putting to Isaiah, Jesus is asking Peter, and Paul heard in his encounter. God is asking, are you simply willing to be called, changed, and spiritually equipped for what only I can do through you? And as he speaks to us through these scriptures, his question is essentially the same for each of us. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to being with you next week. Until then, may God bless you.